if we understood the role of the speaker well, we would have a different set of priorities in who we put in that position in order to be most effective. And here's what's true. If you misunderstand someone's role, you will not be able to measure their success. The Republican-run House of Representatives has been plagued with speaker issues from the beginning. With McCarthy's recent ouster, they've struggled to find the votes for a replacement. Two small groups on opposite ideological sides have sabotage power, and they are using it to their advantage. Is an inherently wrong view of the speaker's role what is actually to blame? Now, this is probably the most boring story I've ever gone over on this podcast. This video will probably get 6 views.
Wow.
But I do think it's important, and I think it's important to understand. And I think if we dig under a few layers, there is some wisdom that we can learn from the House's current lack of wisdom that could be helpful to our lives. The Republicans have the majority in the House of Representatives, but it's a very small majority. They only have 212 people, and you need 217 votes to elect a speaker. So all that means is 5 Republicans can sabotage any vote for anyone that they don't like. And the Republican Party is far from in lockstep with one another across policies. They have a lot of different ideas. There are MAGA Republicans, or, Trump supporting Republicans, really far right conservative Republicans. There are moderate Republicans who are kind of like keep taxes low, Chamber of Commerce Republicans. There are pretty left-leaning Republicans. They can't fully get on board with the ideologies of the Democrats, so they still consider themselves a Republican, but they're voted in from very, very purple states. And so socially, often they're very liberal, and then fiscally, they're often very conservative. So you have a wide range across the Republican Party. And what's happening is the Republicans will put up someone like McCarthy, who was seen, right or wrong, was seen by some of the very furthest conservative Republicans as being too left-leaning, too conciliatory towards Biden. And so they ousted him, and he couldn't get his position back because there were about 5 to 8 Republicans who are not going to vote, and you got to get to 217. So then they put someone who's way more conservative, Jim Jordan, who is someone who is in good graces with Donald Trump, someone who that side of the party could really appreciate. Then the people who are in purple districts, who are more socially liberal, it only took 5 of them. And Jim Jordan, after 3 rounds of voting, was not able to get it. And this is the problem. And now it's like everyone and their dog is going to run for Speaker of the House. And it's going to be difficult for any of them to get it because these tiny minorities, like 5 people out of 221, that's a very, very small percentage of people, 2% of the party, can now stop all the proceedings. And the House of Representatives has kind of ground to a halt. And the Republicans, who do have the majority in that House and could be influencing policy to some degree with a Democrat Senate and a Democrat president, just have their hands in their pockets as they're trying to figure out their own drama and their own mess. The Washington Post is reporting that this is going really poorly for them, and it's showing in the polls. It says, what polls show about the impact of the GOP speaker drama so far? The way things in Congress work these days, everything appears hopeless and unresolvable right up until the moment it gets resolved. All of that said, Republicans have left themselves few options for electing a new speaker and getting out of the mess they've created. Tensions and factionalism appear to be on the rise as Republican Jim Jordan's bid struggles, with a solution arguably now more elusive. And with more than 2 weeks having passed since Kevin McCarthy's ouster, it's fair at this point to start examining the potential political impact. So there've been over 2 weeks now without a speaker. They can't get it figured out. Is this whole drama, while it's rather inside baseball, not many people are following it, but a Yahoo News /YouGov poll released Tuesday showed just 17% of Americans said they were following the situation very closely. Again, this is going to be... Why am I doing this segment? I don't know. It's interesting to me. It's my podcast. I do what I want. But one doesn't have to understand the arcane procedures of the House to grasp the very basic facts here. Those facts are that the Republicans have struggled in a historic way to execute what is quite literally the first order of business for the one lever of lawmaking power they control right now. That's what's so crazy about this. This is all you guys have right now. You don't have the Senate. You don't have the presidency. You don't have a lot of popular opinion in many ways. You've got this one thing, and the very first thing you're supposed to do, like a year and a half ago, you still haven't completed. And this is affecting them, and it could genuinely affect future elections. And so it's boring, and it's Speaker of the House, and what do they even do, and who really cares? But this could have effect on the Republicans long term. And so if you're a Republican, you should be paying attention to that. If you're a Democrat, then you might be happy about all this. To the extent this becomes even more prolonged, there are signs it could register with voters. A CNN poll conducted in the week after McCarthy's ouster showed disapproval of Republicans in Congress rising to 74%.
Wow.
74%. 3 out of every 4 people are unhappy with the Republicans in Congress. Guys, that's horrible. That's up from mid to high 60s in recent years, and it's tied for the party's highest congressional disapproval since 2012. Democrats' disapproval is at 64%. That's also very high, but the GOP is 10 points higher. A Quinnipiac University poll released Tuesday also speaks to this. It asked whether the two parties put party over country or country over party with their actions in Congress. In both cases, Americans viewed the parties as mostly looking out for themselves. But while they said this about Democrats, a 34-point margin, they said it about Republicans by a 50-point margin. So no one trusts Congress. Everyone thinks these Congress people are out for themselves anyway. Everyone has a bad taste in their mouth. 64% of Democrats, 74% of Republicans. They don't trust the people in Congress. They're not actually representing us. They're representing all the lobbyists who write them the biggest checks. They don't actually care about the common good of most people. That's not true for everybody. It is true for a lot of them. And now they can't do the most basic functioning. And I think that at the bottom of all of this is a misunderstanding of what the role of the Speaker of the House actually is. Like why the Republicans are finding themselves in this incredibly embarrassing situation is they don't understand what the role of the Speaker is. And the role of the Speaker is an organizer. They lead the House, they call the sessions, they set the agenda, they keep things in order. It's a very important position in the fact that it is third in line to the presidency. It goes president, vice president, Speaker of the House. Right now, we don't have one of those. And so, if something happened to Kamala and Joe, I don't even know what would happen right now because there's not a third in line because the Republicans can't get their stuff in order to elect somebody to that positions. Do Republicans have a misunderstanding of what the role of the Speaker is? And based on the narratives around the people who have tried to get into the position, I think the answer to that is yes. And here's why. The Speaker of the House is a curator, not a creator. The Speaker of the House is a curator, not a creator. And they are talking about the Speaker as if they create. We need someone who is super duper conservative so that we can create the legislation. We need someone who is more moderate so that we can create an environment where we're not going to lose our House seats in purple districts. The Speaker of the House doesn't create things. They curate things. This is why typically speakers of the House have been somewhere closer to center in their parties. Not always, but often, because what the Speaker of the House has to do is take, like in the Republicans' case right now, 221 people who all have their own agendas, who all have their own views of policies, who probably have more disagreements than even agreements, and has to curate them, has to put them all together and organize an agenda and organize priorities in a way that the Congress can hypothetically actually get something done. The main goal shouldn't even be the political priorities of the Speaker of the House. It should be their skill set in herding cats and organizing disparate people with different views. And I think if we understood the role of the Speaker well, we would have a different set of priorities in who we put in that position in order to be most effective. And here's what's true. If you misunderstand someone's role, you will not be able to measure their success. If you misunderstand someone's role, you will not be able to measure their success. There are times where people act like their kids' teachers should also be their parents. And so we are frustrated because they are not teaching their kid outside the scope of academia. That's their role. It's academics. And if we don't understand exactly what their role is, we won't be able to measure their success. This is why a job description is actually important in a work environment. If you don't know what your role is, then you can't measure your success and your supervisor can't measure your success. If you don't know what your supervisor is supposed to do, then you don't know if you have a good supervisor or a bad one. This happens all the time. The youth pastor is not supposed to be the primary spiritual developer of your children. You are, as the parent. And if you don't understand your role and their role, you won't be able to measure their success. And we have a very, very interesting version of this exact problem in Scripture when it comes to Jesus and one of his 12 disciples, the disciple named Judas. It says this in Matthew 26, while Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, a woman approached him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, and she poured it on his head as he was reclining at the table. And when the disciples saw it, they were indignant. Why this waste? They asked. This might have been sold for a great deal and given to the poor. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, why are you bothering this woman? She's done a noble thing for me. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. By pouring this perfume on my body, she has prepared me for burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. And then one of the 12, the man called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what are you willing to give me if I hand Jesus over to you? And they weighed out 30 pieces of silver for him. And from that time, he started looking for a good opportunity to betray Jesus. It's so interesting that this is the moment that Judas has had enough. And Judas was a zealot. He was looking for a Messiah who was going to come in and create a subterfuge that would take out the Roman Empire. He wanted someone who would come in force. He wanted a warrior who would be king. Jesus keeps talking about dying. If Jesus is dead, he's no good to Judas. Not only that, Judas is the treasurer. We learn in the other gospels that he was actually stealing from the treasury. He had a greed problem. And Jesus is like not good with his money. That's Judas' view. He's like taking a year's worth of money in perfume and just letting this woman dump it on his feet, right? So Judas didn't understand Jesus' role. And so to Judas, he was a failure. Judas thought Jesus was supposed to be a king and a warrior, and therefore he believed that Jesus had failed miserably. We got to get clarity on the roles in the government. What roles do our Congress people play, and are they playing it? And if not, let's vote some people in who will play that role, which is to actually represent us. There are representatives. That's what they're called. They don't represent the lobbies and big business. They don't represent the pharmaceutical industry. They represent us first and foremost. Our voice to the government is our Congress people. So let's get people. The Speaker of the House is a curator. If we understand that, then we can put together the expectations and priorities of what that looks like. We could get a surprising person in there who is the best that we have because we understand the role. If you don't understand the role, you will not be able to measure success. If you enjoyed this clip, make sure you check out the full podcast and subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with all new content. You can also support the channel at patreon.com/Clayton Tyner. Link is in the description below.